Hey everyone, welcome to my kitchen here in Montreal. I'm trying to shoot a bunch of videos today because in the afternoon I'll have homestay students coming from different parts of the world, from Norway and the USA. I'm looking forward to that. So today's video, I'm just going to ramble again. I don't have anything planned, I don't have a script as usual. And I like doing this way because this is practice for me. Practicing learning how to speak off the cuff like this. It's not very easy to do, and I think I've gotten better at it over the years just by doing this stuff. And it's like I say in my videos, the best thing to practice is to practice things that you will use. And that's how you get better at it naturally, organically. And so it is with this talking off the cuff thing. I remember when I first started this YouTube channel, I've had this account for a long time, but I started making videos just before the pandemic, 2019. I needed scripts, and if I tried to, even with a script, I was always hesitating. And now, even though I still hesitate, it's like much better. So the point is, practice what you will use. And that's kind of been the theme of my videos this summer, revolving around the natural way to learn, an organic way to learn, a logical way to learn, instead of practicing all sorts of things that you will never use. Practice for the sake of being able to perform music. That is to learn songs, play with people, and by doing that you have a specific goal. You have short-term and long-term goals covered in one go. And that's how I've noticed a lot of the best players in the world progressed. So today I mainly want to talk about a few things. One of them is the concept of chord scales and arpeggios in jazz music. I've talked about this in previous videos, but I don't think I've really talked about it in this angle before. As you guys know, there's a lot of resources out there on the internet, books, and even workshops. I've even attended live workshops of in different parts of the world, of the local cities or countries, top jazz musicians giving workshops on jazz improvisation. And I always see very similar things. That is, for example, if you have a song like Autumn Leaves in G minor, for instance, and the first chord is C minor, they'll write, alright, C minor, what you have to learn is the Dorian scale, then F7, you have to learn the Mixolydian scale, Ionian, Lydian, and this is interesting, what you play here. There are quite a few different options, but often I see Locrian, Mixolydian, flat 9, flat 13, etc. So this is kind of the standard way of teaching jazz. I've noticed it started to change though. There are a lot of people, YouTubers out there. I just watched a video of Jens Larsen. Nice guy, never met him. I've corresponded before though. But anyway, he made a video saying similar things as me. There are a few of us out there kind of reshaping jazz education, so to speak. So keep up the good fight. But we still have a long way ahead convincing people that the standardized way of teaching might not necessarily be the most efficient one. It's not that the information is not accurate, but it's made more complicated for no reason. And often what I've noticed is it confuses a lot of people who otherwise, if they had good instruction, would be able to progress. And that's kind of one of the main things of my channel that I've realized over the past few years. When I make these videos, sometimes I get messages from younger people or anyone thanking me for giving them hope, inspiration, motivation to continue, when in the past they've had, I guess, bad instruction and felt so very discouraged and wondered, oh, am I not good enough to be able to play well, etc. I even gave a lesson to this one guy who graduated from a prestigious school. I gave him 2 lessons quote unquote, but in actual fact I think it was more like a therapy session. 2 therapy sessions to this young guy, a very, very talented player. But he got so discouraged from his education at the prestigious school and he was left with a lot of confusion. And he asked me a lot of questions and I gave him answers, but my answers are based on researched facts. Whereas a lot of the standardized education, people are teaching based on what they were taught, and then so 50 years ago, so modern jazz education, the way it exists today, started about 50 years ago in this, I would argue, in the 70s. It slowly became very, very standardized. By the 80s and 90s, it was pretty much set in stone, and basically teachers in the 70s taught a system. They taught it to their students, those students taught it to their students, and so on and so on. So every musical generation is repeating the same material without really questioning anything. Whereas when I'm giving you an answer, it's based on historical research. I can tell you, if someone tells me, oh, is it true that when you have this chord, or you should play this scale or whatever, and I'll show you in the musical literature, well, check out what this player did, check out what this player did, check out this, look at the difference. Sometimes they may do what is taught in the music school curriculum, sometimes they do something else. And as someone who has transcribed, or maybe not transcribed, but listened to so much music, I've noticed one thing, that I tend to believe that a lot of the older players are not as knowledgeable as many players today who went to music school. They played a lot more by instinct, but also they didn't make things as complicated as the standard curriculum may make things. Another thing that I also noticed from listening to a lot of these old recordings is that a lot of these players, this is before the days of Pro Tools and everything where you can do overdubs and whatnot, or have isolation booths. Everyone was in the same room and recording, and that's all that you did was you had to live with it, or unless you want to do 1 million takes. But what I meant to say is that I've transcribed so many solos, and I've noticed quote unquote flaws in all the masters playing. Flaws meaning that they played notes that maybe, quote unquote, they should not have theoretically played. But you know, it's live improvisation. Just like in human speech, we don't speak like robots. We have, sometimes we mispronounce words, sometimes we're not 100% articulate, sometimes we make grammatical mistakes. We have, you know, just the way I speak, that's very natural. So a lot of these older players were not quote unquote perfect players either. In stark contrast with a lot of these etudes that you have nowadays, where every solo that is given to you sounds perfect, but it also sounds very academic. So these are things that you have to be aware of in the old days. They didn't make it as hard as music school makes it to be. So the point I wanted to make is, if a lot of these teachers around the world are teaching this quote-unquote standardized way, which I don't necessarily agree with, how is it possible that some people still get good despite receiving this education? Now, there are some people teaching this way and who cannot play, in my opinion, and that's why I always have a little segment where I'm playing at the beginning of my videos, because I'm not a famous person. So if someone just stumbles upon my video, before listening to what I have to say, I want them to watch me play. And if you think I play well, then please stay a while and listen. If you get the reference, you're awesome. But yeah, listen to what I have to say. Now, if you don't like my playing, that's totally fine. I hope you can find your information elsewhere. And the way my approach, the way I play music is highly influenced by the older generation, the older way of playing. But I digress. There are players who don't know how to play, who are basically parroting what they heard, what their teachers heard from their teachers, and so on and so forth until about the 1970s, 1960s. And I've actually done a lot of research into the history of jazz education to the 60s and everything. I've stumbled upon articles where the concept of chord scale theory as we know it today was not standardized in the 60s. Because I encountered articles, educational articles in the 60s trying to teach the same thing, but they didn't have the words that we have today. And they taught it in another way. And even chord formulas, chord symbols themselves were not standardized until some, like the second half of the 20th century. If you check out method books, jazz method books in the 50s, 60s, you'll see that every educator had their own, writing system, labeling system. So proof again that the standardization occurred post-70s, after the 70s. That's due to the progress in technology and everything, printing, computers, etc. And then schools standardizing everything. So the next point is you also have teachers who actually play very well, really well. And they play like the old players, but they're also teaching in that way. So how does that happen? How is it that some people who are taught that way cannot progress, cannot learn to play coherently, but you have players who learn that way who can learn to play coherently as well? How does that happen? Well, my answer to that is these people subconsciously maybe have practiced the way that I'm telling you guys to practice, on top of practicing the things that I don't think you should really spend too much time on. So these things are learning songs, playing with people, listening to a lot of music, and trying to absorb the music. And if you do that, that is really the key to reaching kind of that next level. And it's something that a lot of people are not doing. So these players that are teaching you all these chord scales and everything, but not really doing what they say, they on the side are also learning correctly. And that's the big difference. Now, it's not that the whole chord scale and arpeggio system is wrong per se, but if you're one of those people who are trying to play bebop or the older styles of jazz, not that you have to, you have to understand that that's not the way they were thinking. And the way you think will affect the way the music comes out. And because as a result of this education, there are players who spend a lot of time practicing these chord scales and arpeggios and everything. And it's created a new style of jazz that sounds like that. And if you like that, by all means, you should go for that. I'm not here to tell you what kind of jazz you should play. You decide that for yourself. But I want to give you options and make you aware of this, the importance of the way you think. That said, in the older style, of course scales were used, but they were used maybe not in the same way that they were used, the way they're taught in schools today. The whole thing about the Berkeley method of, what do you call it, avoid notes and tensions and everything. People basically back in the day, they knew their basic scales. They knew their major, minor scales, their basic arpeggios, but there was no bebop scale. I've talked about this in great detail before, so I'm not going to repeat it. But once they knew their basic scales, the rest was just understanding the vocabulary and the language of the style that they were trying to play. Actually, there's what's his name? Johnny Smith, I think, is a guitar player of the old days, who played quite a lot of scalar runs actually. But I think the difference is that he played them with intention and with musical maturity, knowing how, by instinct, how the sound of the scale would react against the chord progression that he was playing over. So I recently checked out a solo of his over Out of Nowhere, like over the E flat 7 chord. In the real book it says B flat minor, E flat 7, but in that recording I think the pianist, or I don't remember anymore, I think they're just playing E flat. And what's very interesting is Johnny Smith plays a B flat minor scale, but he, but B flat minor scale over E flat, which is a concept that, as I've said in previous videos, jazz players use a lot. And I need to correct myself, actually B flat Dorian. He played something kind of a Dorian idea. So he did not play, quote unquote, if I'm using the standardized education terminology, he didn't, over E flat 7, he did not play Mixolydian. He played Dorian. But in my own terms, it's all part of the same scale anyway, all these different modes. But he specifically targeted this note. And at one point on a G chord, he did play a big G major scale to lead to the E flat. I forgot the exact line, but it was something like this. Something like that, to lead us to the E flat. And so that's a scale, obviously, but it's a scale starting on the 5th. And this is something that is very typical in jazz, is to play a scale, a major scale, when you're on the 1 chord, to play a scale starting on the 5th. And on the off, I don't know if he started on the offbeat, but you know, what's that? That's Sonny Rollins. It's very idiomatic. So it's done with taste and with intent. Practicing scales in arpeggios is not necessarily a waste of time. I only think it's a waste of time if you put too much effort into it and not enough into the other things that I should take precedence over this. But here's another thing, when you practice, a lot of people are asking me for practice routines, but I can't give you a practice routine because it depends on your level, your current level, your interests, and your goals. I can't give you a one-size-fits-all solution. I know that's what we want, that's what I would like to have, but there is no such thing. But I can give you general advice. Definitely, if your goal is to play music, and to play music with people, good players, well, you need to learn songs. You need to be able to play coherently. On the guitar, you need to be able to support other musicians, and that's it. But yeah, practicing scales, everything, it's good to have the reference points, you know, like if you're playing Autumn Leaves, it's good to see that you have a C minor here, a chord, and then you can play an arpeggio here, then F7, and you have the scale, and you see how everything is relating to the chord. That's good for reference purposes only. It does not make music, because often over a C minor F7 you probably play something else like this. And that had nothing to do with this is vocabulary. This is something that you acquire by listening to good music, to a lot of good musicians, the players that you like, so that you create your own style by absorbing the styles of the players that you like. And if you like a lot of different players, you're going to come up with your own unique style by doing that. And I've said this in previous videos. What really helped me the most in learning how to improvise was doing that, listening, and transcribing a lot. In the beginning, I've said in previous videos, I needed the guitar to transcribe. Nowadays, I don't need the guitar. I can just listen and just understand the concept. Maybe not the individual notes. I might have to slow things down, of course, or press pause, play for a little bit, pause, etc. I do that. But just from listening, for the most part, if I'm listening to gypsy jazz, swing, or bebop, especially the older players, I kind of understand what they're doing because the sound is already very, very familiar to me from having spent a lot of time with my instrument and just with records and just figuring out what was going on. You need to do this. You need to establish this personal connection with the music. That's why, again, I'm very much against using like tabs or even transcriptions of other people. In fact, I checked out transcriptions of other people on YouTube. You can type songs and type transcription, and I sometimes notice a lot of things, a lot of mistakes, notation mistakes, or even the wrong notes, or even the wrong rhythm. So it's better that you develop this skill yourself, and you can only get better by doing it. That is, if you want to unlock this ability. Now, if you just want to play for fun, you do what you want, of course. This video is for those of you who maybe have higher aspirations. But in the beginning, I remember when I started with gypsy jazz, and what I did for myself is I would listen to Django Reinhardt, Stockler Rosenberg, and there were not many players in those days like today, but back in the old days. But what I did was I took patterns from players and I simplified them. I turned them into one set phrase that I can just play and repeat and not have to think too much. So I created things like this. That's what I teach a lot of, when I used to teach privately. I taught a lot of my students back in the day. This one. This is my own invention, but based on patterns that I heard gypsy jazz players play, Django play. So I invented it myself. But of course, you would make the argument these are just copy and paste licks. It's not musical. And you're right, I agree with you. But as I've said in previous videos, for me, it was very good to go through this because I was not one of those natural players who could just absorb the language and immediately manipulate it. There are people like that. But I was not one of them. If you're one of them, good for you. But if you're not, then I would suggest that you do what I did. Now, I spent more time doing that than the average person might have to do. The reason being that I'm self-taught. I learned a lot on my own. I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have anyone to teach me. So figuring out things took a lot of time, a lot of thought, and a lot of patience, really. But it's something that I desired so much. You know, I was always wondering, why is it that these players are so good? What can I do to get that good? It always bothered me. So if I have one talent, is that I don't give up. I really pierce through like. So anyway, let's say this phrase. At one point, what allowed me to absorb the ingredients of real improvisation was to take these phrases that I had and try to make sense of everything, all the little components. Already this, the quite a few things to unpack here. The first thing is this. Just that. It's basically two chord tones, the third and the root. But the root has this enclosure. And that in itself was very cool. And see if I can reproduce this elsewhere. So that's where it comes in handy to practice those arpeggios or those scales, so you have the reference points. All these different reference points as a result of having practiced scales and arpeggios. By the way, I do have a cool book on Amazon. It's called Visualization for the Jazz. I forgot. The publisher came up with a title. You'll find it in the description box. This book. It talks about this. But anyway, so that's very cool. And then you can get really creative. You can say, hey, it's basically a chord tone above and a chord tone below. The chord tone below is decorated with an enclosure. If you need time to think about this, just pause the video and think about it. But what if you take another chord tone above and a chord tone below and do the same thing? You have 3 new patterns available to you. Isn't that cool? And then what else do you have? This. Just this is very nice. It's the 3rd to the 6th. So you can just you have this chromatic approach. But if you just remove that over a C chord, that's very nice. And then you have this. The idea of going from the root to the 6th. You have just from that phrase, a lot of useful melodic fragments. And when you can break down a lot of musical phrases to their bare components, and you can somehow absorb this into your mind, into your body, that's how you can start to manipulate melodies in the moment. Because one argument that I see a lot from players who don't know how to play often, well, so far statistically it's been 100%. Everyone who has said this, I've noticed they really can't play. They say, oh, practicing this, that, it's bad. You have to be in the moment, you have to feel things. These players are under the belief that when you're playing jazz improvisation, everything that you play should always be new. But already that's kind of statistically impossible, because we only have, in the Western world, and especially when we're playing jazz standards, we only have 12 notes to play with. Practically everything's been done in some combination or another. Like, play a solo over Autumn Leaves and try every single time to do something that you've never ever done before. Like, how far do you go? Like, what do you mean never ever done before? Like, you can't repeat the same phrase ever again. Check out Charlie Parker. He repeats himself so much. And in fact, on my DC Music School website, I have all these artists of different jazz styles. Now, it's true that some players you can hear licks, or not licks, but even patterns that are immediately recognizable, and you hear them repeat them quite a lot. So that's part of their muscle memory tools. And then there are other players who are far more conceptual. So I'll give you a name. John Stoll on my website. Great player. And the way he plays, you would think, oh wow, it's so like off the cuff, which it is. It's so innovative, very original. It is. But if you check out the transcriptions that I did, well, you should do it yourself. You will notice there's still quite a lot of repetition, but he's a player who knows how to hide the repetition, make it so that it's not so apparent until you really investigate it. The same thing with another, we use Gypsy jazz, Sébastien Gignaud was very, very creative, but he still has patterns. Everyone has patterns. It's like a language. We have habits. When we speak a language, I've given this analogy before. Right now, I'm improvising this speech. I don't have anything prepared. It's just coming out like that, just the way we would have a conversation. but everything I say is coherent because it is based on patterns to create coherence. If you're gonna use the English language or whichever language to come up with something completely new off the cuff, it would probably involve you having to say a series of words in rapid succession that have nothing to do with each other, and that would basically make it incoherent. So I'm just going to see, I'm going to read ultra, vinegar, plastic, table, lights, fridge. So I said all these words in rapid succession, they have nothing to do with each other, it was not coherent, but you see, even when I said all these words, it was not smooth. I was hesitating, I was thinking. And when you think, it's already too late. And it's the same with improvisation. You have to work a lot on the vocabulary, create muscle memory, you create pathways in your brain or something, in your brain and fingers, so that when you start to play, everything is just music. And you're playing, you're reacting, not thinking, okay, I should play this Dorian scale, I should talk in the third, I should talk in the... No, you're just hearing melodies. So let's say I'm playing a solo over what we said earlier, out of nowhere. I hear things already. How this came out, there was no thinking. There was no this scale. All the thinking was done in the past. I prepared, not prepared, but I practiced. Of course, I practiced my basic scales, but I practiced a lot of these musical fragments that are very musical. Etc. There's no thinking, there's only reacting. And here's the thing, I don't even consider myself a great improviser. I mean, I get by, I'm decent at it, but there are people way better than me at this because I haven't done enough work. But hopefully you will do the work and you will be able to surpass me very quickly. I made a video, I think last year, August of last year, where I talk about this talent phenomenon. Now, talent, of course, can be a big help, but talent exists on a spectrum. Some people have talent for hearing melodies. That's something I think I had in the beginning. I had a great talent for hearing single notes, but I had no talent for hearing chords. That was one of my weaknesses, so I worked hard to address that. Some people have a talent for rhythm. People have a talent for just absorbing language without even having to transcribe. I talked about this in the previous video. That's the case for quite a number of players on my DC music schools, that they said, I never transcribed a single solo, never transcribed a single lick, but I listened to so much music that I just naturally had it in me. Again, if you're such a person, wonderful. But if you're not, let's just say you don't have a talent in anything, but you don't have a learning disability. Listen, let me tell you, I have good news for you. If you just know how, if you have the right coaching, if you know the right mindset, you can get good in 3 years. By good, I'm not saying you play at the level of Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, B. Ray, or whatever. Good means that you know certain songs that you can play with people. You can play a decent coherent solo. It doesn't have to be flashy. Jazz solos don't have to be like the most absolutely amazing thing ever created. It can be simple, but just beautiful and effective. Within 3 years, you can be good if you just know how to practice, and if you have if you're willing to put in the work. And like I said in a video some weeks ago, it's a lifestyle change. That's probably the hardest thing to do, this lifestyle change. So hopefully you can find the motivation to do it. You have to understand yourself really well so that you can find a practice plan that is most effective at your level, and will change consistently as you get better. As you get better and better, you'll be able to practice the way some of the quote-unquote talented players practice, that is, just listening and just absorbing. I have reached that stage now. I can just hear music, and without practicing on the guitar, I just grab my guitar and I can just reproduce some of these concepts. But sometimes, every now and then, I do also have to use my guitar and figure out what's going on. But you can achieve that level. Now, I don't know where some of you are watching this from. I know some of you are living in countries or cities or villages, whatever, where there's no music scene whatsoever. And you're left all alone. So then it's kind of hard to create this natural environment when you have no one to play with, right? I understand the frustration. I've talked about this, you have choices to make. How important is music to you? If it's that important, maybe you consider moving to a city where there's a music scene. I know some people who are not professional musicians, but to whom music is so important that they chose to move to cities with a music scene while pursuing their own careers. So that's food for thought. But like I said, if you just want to play for fun, don't worry about anything. Don't worry even about practicing. Just have fun. You only worry about practicing when there's a need to practice. That is, you playing with people. If you're playing alone, then you can do whatever you want. You can record yourself. That's a good way to practice. But if you're playing with people, then there are some requirements in order to play with people. So two people to play together and to make it out, to survive it, both of you will have to work on being able to accompany and be able to communicate coherently. So you can have an intro to a song, someone plays the melody, you play a solo, they play a solo, maybe you trade, and then you're in the song. You have to develop the skills for that. And then if you start going to jam sessions, then you have to check out the songs that people tend to call, and you learn those songs, and that's how it continues. I know people who have left their countries because they reached a plateau. The country didn't offer the environment that allowed them to reach past the next stage. So they moved to other countries where they pursue the music that they want to play. People go to parts of the USA to learn bluegrass. People go to parts of the USA to play the blues. People go to Canada to learn traditional music, the East Coast and the West Coast. People go to India to learn Indian music, China to learn Chinese music, etc. Life can be a little bit unfair when you're not born into that culture, that world. I'm Canadian. I'm born and raised in Montreal. This is, especially when I started, there was practically no gypsy jazz here. I was not born in the right world, and I never went to live in Europe with the gypsy and everything, but I had managed to befriend them, and whenever I would travel there, I really cherished the moments, and I took the opportunity to really absorb as much as I could. So that did help a lot. In the end, you have to choose for yourself. So I hope this motivates you to just go for it. But don't give yourself a headache. Protect your mental sanity. In the end, the important thing is that you're happy and that you're enjoying life. If you're practicing and you start to feel really depressed, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to go through so much mental anguish for music? For me, music is a happy place. And when I practice, if I practice, I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I know people who have severe issues because of all the torture they went through. You might not see this. You see artists on stage, they play well, but you don't see the problems that they have at home. That's why I have this holistic approach to teaching, where I try to prioritize your health first and foremost before anything else. And only you can answer that for yourself. How much is too much, and how far you're willing to go for music.